Hello, hello everyone. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And today I am making cards using this Yuzu Nook stamp set from Picket Studios called Big Piggy Hugs. It's so cute. It's so cute. She had a couple sets in the Picket Fence January release. I'll link to the release in the description box below because it is definitely worth checking out. I went with one of the more detailed sets in a previous video, but this one has been sitting just staring at me, just waiting. So inked it up, couldn't make up my mind, used all the stamps, all the images anyway, and made a couple cards. So we'll do some Olo marker coloring, some stenciling, couple types of splatter, all the fun things. As always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It is what helps pay the bills, keeps heaters going, enables me to keep bringing out content. And yeah, that's it for the housekeeping. Let's get into making the cards. So I could not decide on like a couple of images. Like I couldn't narrow down. This main one, or to me it's the main one, of the little piggy sitting in the big like cabbage or lettuce head, whatever, was the one I was planning on using. And then I was like, oh, I'll need another one, to go with it. And then I couldn't stop. I couldn't narrow it down. So I was like, I'm gonna stamp all of it. I'm gonna stamp all the images, use them all, because they're all adorable. So I've got my big old stamp wheel out here, and this is Simon Says Stamp 120 pound smooth white cardstock. That's my go-to for alcohol marker coloring. There's many other that work. This is just the one I've been using for years now. So I lined up all the images, making sure I've got enough space between them because I'm going to use the coordinating dies when I'm done to die cut everything. And then I am stamping these images with alcohol marker friendly ink. And I'm going to stamp them twice, even though really they stamp practically perfect the first time right out the bat. But it's habit. It's just habit to stamp everything twice. So that's what I did. And then once everything is stamped, I'm going to color with my Olo markers. Any alcohol markers will work. I just decided to go with Olos today. And if you haven't seen my other videos using these markers, I do not have mine connected. They do come with connectors. This is basically a half marker, and you connect it to either another color or you can get like the chisel ends, etc., etc. I don't have the chisel ends because I don't use chisel ends for my coloring, and I'm still holding out. I keep hearing that Olo is going to release fine nibs, like bullet nibs, and that's what I'm waiting for. And then I'll connect the markers and they will look normal and they won't drive anyone crazy. I honestly don't mind coloring with them like this, and it's a convenience factor so I can see every single color. So that's why they look different. Anyway, that first little bit of coloring was in real time. I do not color this fast at all. These didn't take that long to color, really. But yeah, I speed this up in editing, and I go darkest to lightest. It's another sort of just convenience thing, honestly. And then I just always have the marker lids on screen so you can see like what color's what. I kept my blends pretty basic, nothing too crazy. The one thing I did mix up, and this is on purpose, is greens. I do this when I'm doing, florals with different greenery, things like that. You definitely want to use different shades of green when you're doing images either like this or a floral type image that has different types of, leaves, greenery, etc. Because otherwise everything's going to look the same, and that's not how it is in nature, So I colored all the lettuce or cabbage, one green blend, and then the carrot tops I'll do a different green blend, and then I'll bring in a third green blend for the remaining little green bits. So I just kept working my way around, just kind of going at random, really. And yeah, here's my second green combo for, it was the carrot tops, and then I did the same thing with the oranges, like the orange blend. Started coloring parts of their outfits with it too, just keeping it all simple, and it all will go together. Because when I was coloring all these images, I didn't know what I was going to do with them. Didn't quite have the cards planned that far ahead. I just knew I wanted to use these images. So I colored all their little outfits to match like just everything, so that, yeah, I could mix and match and figure out what I wanted to do when they're all finished. So kept working my way around. Those little earthworms, who'd have thunk? Those little earthworms are just, stop it. Seriously, love it. And I colored those other two little things as turnips. You could technically color them as carrots, but I think they're meant to be turnips, but also it just brought in that little, just that little pop of like a reddish color. And then the final green combo, I did that on the corn and the turnip tops. And then my last little pop of color is I brought in, well, this wasn't a pop color. Right there was just warm grays for the little picket fence and the band around the barrel. But the last pop of color is these blue-green shades that I added to some of their little outfits, just again to give it that little extra something. And then once I was done the coloring, I just took some of the darkest shades of these blends that I did and just dotted them on the images. And you get larger dots when you press harder, smaller dots when you barely touch the tip of the marker to the cardstock. You don't have to do this. I don't always do this. It just depends on my mood, and sometimes I want to, and this time I wanted to. It just adds a fun like texture to everything. So just, again, worked my way around, added all the little dots, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my white gel pen, adding random little highlights and then random little dots, just cuz. And my gel pen, it's a Jelly Roll 10 gel pen, so the widest gel pen. And the big thing to remember specifically with gel pens is you need to use them fairly consistently. If you let them sit for weeks, months, forever, they dry out. The tip dries out and it won't work. But if you use them consistently enough, like this one, I pretty much never have problems with it. I only used to have problems with my gel pens when I would just let them sit, and I would go grab it weeks after the fact, months after the fact, and they wouldn't work. You can sometimes get them working again though by like scribbling them on the palm of your hand, like warm them up a little bit in your hand and try scribbling directly on your skin with it, because sometimes that'll warm it up and get that little ball point to start moving, and see if you can get it working that way. So that plus like just scribbling on scraps of paper can sometimes get them working again, and then just be consistent with them, So after I added all my little white gel pen bits, I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut all of these. So this was why I spaced all the stamps out, because then this way I can die cut everything in one pass. And then after I die cut that, I also used the Beyond Basics Vintage Rectangles and Cover Plate die set. It's a big die set. There's 3 cover plate dies and then a bunch of like decal edge layering dies. I used this stone one and ran that through with some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. So it presses all that stone texture into it, which I love it so much. So after I had die cut that Desert Storm cardstock with that panel, I trimmed the pieces down, because this is going to be part of my background. And then I stuck them to my Picket Fence paper inking palette. And I've got some Gathered Twigs Distress ink and my Picket Fence paper pouncer. And I'm pouncing this ink on this background, and I'm not pressing the pouncer. It's impossible to show on camera, but I'm like barely pushing it onto the cardstock, because that way, one, I'm getting a little bit more texture doing it like that, but also because I'm not pressing it, the ink isn't getting in between, like into the grout on this cardstock. So it's keeping that darker ink more like on the top, and that'll also help create more texture. And I'm going to continue this with, now I'm using Ground Espresso, because I started with Gathered Twigs, going to Ground Espresso, which is darker, and just like lightly tapping the pouncer. Like I'm not trying to get a blend. I'm not trying to get things even, because I want the texture anyway. So added that to these panels, and then I wiped off my paper inking palette, and now I've just got a little panel of white cardstock and the On a Cloudy Day stencil, which I've used in previous videos. Love. And another paper pouncer. This time I'm using salvaged patina distress ink. And originally I was going to just have like almost like a fade, like barely, going. But then once I started going, I was like, no, I want all the clouds. I want them all. So, but same thing. I wasn't aiming for like perfection. I like I kind of like the texture. It depends on it just depends on my mood. But I was like, little uneven bits here and there. And distress inks do not smooth out as they dry because that's not the nature of these inks. So that's also why I went with them. And yeah, quick and simple. So after I'd done that, I also pulled out, but wait, there's more. Another stencil set. This is the Scene Building A2 stencil set. And I'm using just the one stencil from this set for this little grassy edge. And I'd use the Neenah cardstock panel because that's going to go along the bottom. Just give me a guide of where to place this stencil. And over that, I pounced Mowed Lawn Distress ink. And not worried about the bottom portion because that's going to get covered up. So it doesn't need to be even or anything like that. So just like so. So I'm going to repeat that on the second panel because by now I'm going to do 2 cards. When I was coloring all the images, I knew I was going to get more than 1 card, but off camera, after I die cut all the images, I had like kind of figured out a couple little layouts and I was like, okay, we're going to do 2 cards and then that's where this is all going. So pounce that Mowed Lawn ink over this grassy little stencil here. And then I can adhere those panels of the Neenah Desert Storm cardstock to the bottom. Just like so. Just adhered that with my liquid glue. And then after I'd done that, I pulled out some twine from my stash, which I don't even think is on the market anymore. This was some Lawn Fawn twine. I think they called theirs trimmings. Something like that. So I just wrapped it around the panel, tied it in a bow. And then I had I had figured out my layout of all of these images onto these card fronts. And I used a mix of liquid glue and foam squares to adhere all the different little elements here, because that also will just build dimension. And it also makes it easier to adhere over top of like the twine because it does kind of get in the way. So using the foam squares just pops these other little bits up so that they're not in the way of the twine. So I had my first little layout and then I figured out my second layout, did the exact same thing, adhered things with craft tacky glue, popped a couple of these up with little foam squares, and then these little earthworms. I ended up putting one on each of these card fronts because they just worked, you know? Again, they were just, I'm a sucker for cute images. What can I say? So adhered one, he's just crawling along. And then the other one just worked with the other card front. So stuck him into place as well. Just like that. Love him. And then I grabbed a scrap of brown cardstock. I used my anti-static powder tool on that to keep the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped images. And I stamped a couple sentiments from the set with clear embossing ink. And then coated that with some detail white embossing powder. Tapped off the excess. And then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool until everything is smooth and melted. Once that is melted, I buff away that excess anti-static powder with my microfiber cloth. And then I use the coordinating wafer dies to die cut these. Because the stamp set, the coordinating wafer dies for the stamp set also die cut all of the sentiments. Chef's kiss. Love that always. Always. So these I just taped into place because I didn't want those to shift when I run them through my die cut machine. And then I was going to adhere them like immediately, but then I remembered, I was like, oh, I want to add splatter and I don't want to deal with like trying to cover up the sentiments because I didn't want to get splatter on the sentiments. So I got the sentiments prepped. You know, I put my little foam squares on the back of them, but we're going to come back to those and adhere them at the very end. So I set those aside and I'm framing out these little panels. I use some of the like rectangles, the vintage rectangles. They're basically like decal edge rectangles. There's like 4 or 5 of them in the vintage rectangles and cover plate die set. So I die cut some brown cardstock and some aqua cardstock with a couple of them just to frame out my card front. And I put some foam tape on the back of the main panel and then adhered it to the brown cardstock. And then did the same thing with the second card. So got those popped into place and then adhered these to the like vintage rectangle that I die cut from the aqua cardstock using just one of the dies that was just slightly larger. So then they've got this like rough little edge. I need to use these more often. I really like these. They're just fun. And it's also like freeing in the sense because I'm not having to like line up like perfectly straight edges, you know, which sometimes can get really annoying. It's like, oh, these are, you know, uneven on purpose. I like that. Anywho, put the insides of my cards into the stamp wheel. My cards are top folding A2 white note cards, so 4¼ by 5½ inches. And I'm stamping sentiments from the stamp set with that same black ink and inking them up and stamping them twice out of habit. So I'd lined up the sentiment, stamped it twice, and then got the second card base, second sentiment, repeat the process, ink it up, stamp it, ink it up, stamp it. Because again, it's just habit. So I got those stamped, and then I took just a couple of the little Piggie images from the set, and those I just used an acrylic block because I don't need to stamp these twice because habit, you know? So these I'm stamping with the salvaged patina ink just to finish off the inside. So the one that says love you, and he's hugging the cabbage. I don't know why. I think this whole set's adorable, and these cards were fun. And then this one where it says, the inside says, if you were a carrot, I'd always pick you. I got a kick out of that one too. So stamp the one pulling the big carrot, you know. And then once those were stamped on the inside, I adhered the card fronts to the card bases, and then we're going to add splatter. This was why I left the sentiments off. So I put the card base into my splat box, and I'm using the Picket Studios Paper Splatter Opaque White. So I put a little bit of that on my palette, got my fan brush, and then just lightly splatter this. I'm not going completely insane, but you know, just a smidge. So do that the first card front, then I'm going to do it to the second card. Then I'm going to put a piece of copy paper into my splat box because I'm doing this, you know, directly onto finished cards, and I don't want to get smears and crud on the back of the card base. And now I want to splatter with black. So I'm going to just put a piece of copy paper in here to protect the backs of my cards. And this time I'm going to use the Picket Paper Splatter Watercolor Opaque Black. So put some of that on my palette, got it on my fan brush, and then added that to my cards. And again, just fairly lightly, you know, sometimes I'll go to town and I will just cover my cards with splatter. It depends on my mood. But with these, I just needed just a little bit. So flip the copy paper over, because trust me, it's happened so many times and I don't overly care, but you know, if I have enough foresight to protect the backs of my cards, I will. So did the same thing with the second card, just added a bit of that black splatter, cleaned off my brush, cleaned off my palette, let the splatter dry, and then I can pop my little sentiments into place because they're already ready to go. So once these are popped into place, these cards are complete. I decided not to add any other like bling or anything because the images are they're so cute. Love it. These are a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I very much appreciate you hanging out with me. Like I mentioned in the intro, all the links to all the things are in the description box directly below the video, so you can check that out if you are interested. Like I said, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for thumbs upping and commenting. It helps a ton, and I very much appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!